Um, wow, depends how far we go back. I mean, I think the idea of making records for me started with Revolver. So Tomorrow Never Knows, the final track on the Beatles album, was kind of the first time it occurred to me that, oh, hold on, there are people doing things with sound that are not just people playing instruments. So that was the first time I kind of realized that, and I was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8. But then I started playing instruments. I played French horn, I played trumpet, lots of orchestra and band instruments. Um, but I wasn't good enough to do anything with that and sort of realized that early on. But I was also always the person who liked to push buttons and have things happen. So I started doing lights at school for bands, and I started doing sound, like at the Battle of the Bands, and just loved the technology and letting that be the way that I would be part of a performance. And then through a friend of my parents, I went to see a recording studio. My parents' friends had a son who worked at a studio in New York City, and I went in and saw it and saw a console for the first time, and just that was it. Like, I wanted to be the guy who could do that. So once I sort of realized it existed, then I went to the University of Miami and did a 4-year recording program there. And then was going to go the traditional route of being a runner at a studio and work my way up, but got an offer to work for New England Digital, who made the Synclavier, which was a very early digital sequencer, synthesizer, sampler, and then eventually a hard disk recorder. So kind of got into the technology side very early on in the digital transition. So learned on analog tape and the digital stuff, and then from there was just working in studios. Well, I had a few big breaks. I mean, the first was getting the job with New England Digital, because that I could have very easily worked at a studio. Most of my friends who graduated at the same time went to LA or New York and got jobs in studios, and I'm sure that would have worked out fine, but just having this different path with New England Digital really helped, because the Synclavier was very, very expensive, so only very successful people had them. So I was doing field service, so I would show up when it was broken. So there'd be some incredibly expensive session going on, sometimes with orchestras sitting and waiting. And I would have to show up, make it work, which meant that then they wouldn't let me leave. So I'd have to sit in sessions. But these sessions were with people like Frank Zappa and Sting and Benny Anderson and all of the incredibly successful people at that time. So I was able to sit in on sessions that as a runner I never would have gotten anywhere near. And also being in lots of different studios at the same time. So wherever the Synclavier happened to be, that's where I would go to work on it. So I had a lot of exposure very early on. And then because of knowing how to program the Synclavier, when I finally decided I wanted to go and make records instead of being field service, and I quit and went freelance, I had this in as somebody who knew how to run the technology. So from there, I toured with Michael Jackson, which eventually led to a Michael Jackson record. I worked on a Stones record with Don Was. And so those breaks came just from knowing the technologies, because it was very, very early days for digital editing, and then Pro Tools, when that finally kind of caught on. I was one of the first Pro Tools guys. So that got me in the door on lots and lots of sessions. And then from there, it would just be one session after another. I mean, I worked with Don Was, like I'd said, then Rob Cavallo, then Rick Rubin, and then while working with Rick Rubin, went from editing to recording to mixing. And so it was always just one thing leading to another, but there were lots of times along the way where an opportunity presented itself. So I think one of my strengths, and why my discography is so bizarre, is that I treat everything exactly the same. I don't care if it's guitars or loops or orchestras. I want it to be exciting and aggressive when it's supposed to be aggressive, and very quiet when it's supposed to be very quiet. It's all just about how it feels when you're listening. And so, like, I approach 99 Problems exactly the same way I approach Black Sabbath and Metallica. It just needs to have a chorus that is big, and then the verse has to be interesting and keep you there. But when things kick in, they have to mean something. And so, yeah, I mix everything like it's a rock band through a PA, basically.